Greetings, people, and welcome to the LPF Pod Lounge. Wow, I don't know what's wrong with me. Anyway, this is a podcast brought to you by myself, Ryan Peters of Living Plant Foods. And I decided to do this to basically share the stories of different people that have transitioned to a plant-based lifestyle. Now, this is a podcast that will hopefully inspire you, the listener, on your journey to well-being. I believe that we are all in this together because we are all connected. We are all learning and growing to evolve to become better and healthier versions of ourselves. These conversations are all organic, all raw, all living, and all plant-based. So I hope you enjoy as we share our stories to uplift and push each other forward. Today, people, I have a very, very special guest on the show. I am so excited and I am so stoked and so grateful to have him in the Pod Lounge. He is someone that I have been a fan of and looked up to for many years on my journey. And he is someone I am so honored to call my teacher, a man who I had the pleasure of training under. He goes by the name of Dr. Aris Latham. So the 2012 second edition of Oxford Encyclopedia of Food and Drink in America acclaims the raw food movement owes much to Dr. Aris Latham. He is considered to be the father of gourmet ethical raw foods cuisine in the States. Dr. Aris Latham debuted his raw food creations in 1979 when he started Sunfired Foods, a live food company in Harlem, New York. In the years since, he has trained thousands of raw food chefs, including myself, and added innumerable recipes to his repertoire. Over the years, Sunfired Cuisine delicacies have been catered to numerous legendary celebrities and dignitaries such as Dick Gregory, Erykah Badu, Rita Marley, Prince, Deepak Chopra, and Sidney Poitier, to name but a few. Sunfired Foods has also been featured by Black Entertainment Television, the Food Network, CNBC's Alive and Wellness, ABC's Eyewitness News, CBS News, and Jamaica's CBM TV, to name but a few. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to have this interview with me.
You're welcome, my brother.
I really do appreciate it, man. I feel honored to have you on this podcast, which I call the Pod Lounge. So yeah, it's nice to have you in the Pod Lounge.
Okay.
But yeah, so first and foremost, how are you, and how have you been?
Well, I tell you, I am excellent, man. I've been fine, and just enjoying a perfect year right now. Just loving it.
That's good. That's great to hear, man. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the people, to the listeners. Who are you, and where do you come from? Where do you reside?
Oh, okay. Well, wow. My name is Aris Latham. I'm a food scientist in Sunfired Cuisine, according to the honor that's been bestowed upon me, honorary doctorate degree in Sunfired Food Science for having developed the whole Sunfired Cuisine. And also, I've been acclaimed by the Oxford Encyclopedia of Food and Drink as the father of ethical gourmet raw food cuisine. So it's been quite a journey, keeping up with all of these accolades. But I was born in Panama 70 years ago.
Wow.
And I been traveling around the world, lived in the U.S. for quite some time, lived in Brazil, in Jamaica, in Tanzania. I'm now residing in Costa Rica. And pretty much, my journey has taken me far and wide, north, south, east, west, Asia, Africa, all of the Americas, parts of Europe. And it continues, just sharing the Sunfired Cuisine art and science. I have a master's degree in linguistics. So as a linguist, traveling the world, studying languages and living amongst people sharing their languages, I got to share their food as well. So I've
Amazing.
developed, I've developed quite an eclectic brand of what I would say, a world cuisine,
Yeah.
fusing what I gleaned from growing up in my grandmother's and my mother's kitchen.
Mhm.
Being born in Panama, my grandparents were uh, pretty much at the time, you would say, migrant workers in the early 1900s when they migrated from Jamaica and Barbados to Panama during the building of the canal, of the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
So, I pretty much have been continuing in their footsteps and, enjoying the legacy of growing up, saying the kitchens in my home and being exposed to just a whole creative, fresh culinary energy, even though at the time growing up with them, our diet was quite what you may call normal, just the standard fare.
Yeah.
But the big difference was, everything was fresh. And especially when I was born in 47, growing up in those times, it was quite limited in the terms of the technology that we had, especially in our position as migrant workers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about the age of the icebox,
Yeah.
the cold pot. Then we moved on to the kerosene stove and those types of things. So our cooking was still even quite limited. And again, anything we had was, fresh harvest, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, fresh fish. We had our own chicken coop. We'll, slaughter the chicken that morning, and have it ready for Sunday dinner. If we ate pork, it was fresh sliced,
Yeah.
fresh caught fish. So, taking that legacy and bringing it in up to date, in my era and growing up in New York City on the college campus in the 60s, well, it's all been history since then, since the days of the hippies, the Vietnam War, anti-war movement, and the Black Power movement.
Mhm.
It was all about self-defense based on, the revolution,
Yeah.
So it was quite uncool for people like myself on the college campus in those days to be caught, eating some hot dogs and hamburgers, because as far as we were concerned, again, it's a revolution. There's a war out there,
Right. Right.
and I'm not going to the war and be a casualty and get killed trying to, protect somebody's rice fields in Vietnam. So why should I be eating rice,
Yeah.
that I know that is contaminated? Why should I be eating chicken and fish and, steak and all of these things, knowing that, there's a revolution going on. Here we are in the 60s taking over college campuses, sitting in the president's office, with big guns, So hey, how you gonna do? How you gonna come off eating that hamburger and sneezing, and we here supposed to be trying to hold the peace, hold the quiet, meditate, and holding the fort down, so we can get our systems right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't about ingesting food as a weapon. So this is where the consciousness got rooted, and it was all about back to the land, in the hood, cooperative economics, having our own co-ops and things like that, vegetarian 101, ghetto style,
Right. Right.
and moving with the hippies, back to the land, organic, throw your shoes away, sandals,
Right.
grow your hair,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
counterculture. So revolution going on. So anyway, as we said back then, and we still say it even up to today, a luta continua. The
Wow.
struggle continues. So we've
Okay.
just, I've just taken the whole revolutionary zeal and, locked it, tight for basically the past 50 years. and, uh, and I'm still a rebel. It's not about animal rights. It's not about saving the environment. It's not about spirituality. It's about consciousness. It's about self-defense. It's about not killing myself. It's about not getting sick, you know. And hey, as I said, the rest has been history, my brother.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And that actually leads into a couple of my other questions as well. So, so when did you decide to transition to plant-based? I know you said that was in the 60s, but when did you consciously decide, you know what, this is what I'm going to do? And when you did decide, um, what was it for? Like, what was the reasons for? Like, was it? I know you probably just kind of answered that question anyway, but was it for health? Was it for the animals, environmental, or was it literally just, you know, because it was a conscious thing?
It was absolutely a conscious thing. It's about, being a college student.
Hmm.
When I went into college in '67, it took me about a year to get with the hipness, to get hip,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah,
with the movement. So it was about the movement of our times, peer pressure, if you want to call it that,
yeah.
trying to be hip, trying to relate, so
Okay.
it was cool to have your little bag of trail mix,
Right.
you know,
That's so
and
cool.
snacking on your trail mix, on the campus rather than grabbing a hot dog or a hamburger. So
And do you?
again, being in that educational setting with that young, fresh, uh, mind that's like a sponge. It was all about intellectual, capacitation.
Hmm.
Being wise, being hip, and stepping up to shoulder, you know, my responsibility of being taking ownership of my life, my body, and knowing quite clearly that, especially in the neighborhood that I was living in the inner city, it's the apples that I found in my neighborhood was not the same apples that I found out in the suburbs,
Right,
where I was
right.
going to school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So fusing that together, so I wasn't sick. I wasn't, again, seeking a guru or anything like that. Wasn't trying to save no animals.
Hmm.
Well, absolutely, I was saving the animal that I live in.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
saving this
Exactly.
this this animal, this beast, this body in which I dwell in. And making sure that it served me well. And it was able to, you know, support me through the battle. So, you know, was all about the revolution. And again, it still is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And do you feel like, listening to you and just going back to you saying how it was cool and it was hip to, have a bag of nuts or, and it wasn't cool to be eating a hot dog. Do you feel like that's kind of happening again in this day and age? Because, the plant-based, quote unquote veganism movement is kind of becoming really popular in this day and age. And it is cool to, you know, to walk around and eat your fruits and to have a good hearty salad and stuff like that. And it's now becoming uncool to go and grab a burger or a hot dog. So it feels like everything comes back around. And do you feel like that's happening now?
Well, actually, no. My take is no. It's not coming back around.
Right.
What you're seeing is the fruits of the seeds that we planted in the '60s.
Mm,
It has just gone to higher heights. As the age of information makes information more accessible now. I
mm-hmm.
mean, if it wasn't for being on the college campus for me, I would have not have gotten the information, the consciousness that, hey, there's this lifestyle, there is this whole thing about vegetarianism,
Right.
back then. So So what you're seeing today, again, it's the fruit of the seeds that we're planted, but it's gone on a higher level. When I got into, well, it was 1970 when I became a full-fledged vegetarian, and I still hug with the word vegetarian. I'm not a vegan. I
Right.
haven't bought into the vegan concept. Well, veganism or vegan is a word that was coined, I believe, in 1942 by an Englishman, and that word was used to differentiate vegetarians, or today even now they're using the word plant-based. I mean, but it's still a vegetarian we're talking about. It's still vegetarianism.
Mm-hmm.
But to differentiate between a vegetarian who was strictly into it based on health, fitness, longevity, consciousness, and XYZ, as opposed to those who were into it based on the animal rights movement. Veganism is about animal rights movement. It is not about human rights movement. Human rights movement is vegetarianism. So I do not accept the whole concept of a lacto-ovo vegetarian. What the heck is a lacto-ovo vegetarian? Either you're a vegetarian or you're not. Either you're pregnant or you're not. There's no almost pregnant. There's no almost vegetarian, lacto-ovo vegetarian. So if you were to buy into that and you accept that whole lacto-ovo vegetarian, so what about the fish vegetarian? What about the chicken vegetarian? What about the steak vegetarian? What about the pork vegetarian? So it kind of left the door open. I personally believe that that word vegan should have been ascribed to people who are on the other side of the fence, not people, because vegetarian means one who eats food that vegetates.
Right.
Eggs do not vegetate.
Right.
Cheese don't vegetate. It's not, doesn't come from a vegetable source. So maybe they should have called those other people vegans or whatever, but not us.
Yeah.
So I am a vegetarian. The word vegetarian is a word that I hug and cling to very dearly.
Yeah.
And I make sure that, I myself don't refer or identify myself as a vegan.
Right.
Again, that word vegan was coined in 1942 to differentiate between a vegetarian who was about animal rights. So a vegan, a true vegan to the word, based on how it has been defined, is someone who does not partake of the eating of animal-based food because of the inhumane conditions and so forth and so on that these animals went through during their life.
Mm-hmm.
So a vegan not only ascribes to it based on, the dietary principle, but it's about animal rights. So which includes not also using any clothing, any apparels that is made from animal-based products, whether it's leather or mink, fur or wool or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So, and also, a vegan does not partake of any anything that has been used, that animals were used in its testing.
Yeah.
So say like even say a vaccine, that they experimented with animals to develop this vaccine. A vegan would not take vaccines based on that.
Yeah.
A vegan would not use soap that has pork fat in it, which is most of the white soaps like Ivory and Dove and all of those. They all have pork fat in them.
Right.
And those that do not have pork fat, they have chicken fat in it.
Wow.
Or some kind of animal fat. There's this whole collection of the grease from restaurants that the soap industry collects, and they take that to make soap. So
Wow.
sure, a
I didn't even
vegan
know
would
that.
make sure that not just only your soap, but all of your body products, body care products, does not include anything that comes from an animal. The average makeup that most, uh, or skincare products
Hmm.
that is out there, may have as one of the ingredients in it something like urea. Urea is urine,
Wow.
and more than likely it's from an animal. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're putting on a nice facial something to tighten your skin, but that facial something was made with animal pee, you know,
Wow. I didn't even
or
know none of that.
or you might be using a condom that's made with animal, you know, uh, products derived from animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might be eating jello, it has gelatin in it. You might be taking a great herbal laxative or any kind of herb that comes in a gelatin capsule.
Hmm.
You're not a vegan. You're wearing leather shoes, you have a leather bag, a leather coat, a leather belt. You're not a vegan. So, but many people today, they use the term very loosely just because they so-called only eat plant-based.
Hmm.
I'm a vegan. And then you got your car with the leather seats sitting there, you're sitting on,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
leather furniture in your house. I mean, it's on and on and on. So for me, I am a vegetarian. I'm not going to let them, you know, keep corrupting and diminishing the value of that word. The same like what they have done with natural, you know,
Right. Right.
and many other words. Even organic today. What's organic? What is labeled organic is not necessarily organic.
Right.
Even the word raw. You know, coconut oil, raw extra virgin cold press coconut oil. There's no such thing if you buying it off of a grocery shelf in a natural food store and it's been sitting on that shelf for more than a day, because raw coconut oil would go rancid in a day.
Mm.
So right, so it's cold pressed, but they never told you that the machine that they use to grind the coconut, the friction from the machine heated up the machine. The machine got so hot that it actually cooked the coconut. So they can tell you it's raw, it's organic, it's cold pressed, but they don't have to tell you that it got cooked in the process of being ground, because that's not considered technically cooking.
Hmm.
But it has gone beyond a certain temperature, so the enzymes have been destroyed so that coconut oil will not go rancid. So there's many other layers to that whole thing. So this is what they have been doing. The same thing like they have done with the word meat. The original meaning of the word meat is not reserved for just animal flesh.
Right.
The meat of the mango, the meat
Yeah.
of the apple,
The meat of the coconut.
the nut meat,
Yeah.
coconut meat. So
That's.
yes, I do eat meat. So this is where, when you approach it from a revolutionary perspective, and also looking at linguistics and how they use words, you know, to trick your knowledge, or what we used to call in the 60s trickonology. It goes on today, but they call it marketing,
Right.
but it's still trickonology.
Wow. Absolutely. That's crazy. So, when did you, like, how was you, like, did you dive straight in to becoming vegetarian, or was it a gradual process?
Well, it was basically based on how I was receiving the information.
Right.
So I embarked on the process in 1968, and this is our. But the first thing I did, actually, before I even did anything about changing my diet, the first thing I did, I fasted,
Right.
because I I I, I found out where they were buying these nuts and seeds and dried fruits to put in the little bag to make the trail mix. And I was like, well, I want to make my own trail mix.
Mm-hmm.
So I found out that they were buying these ingredients in health food stores. So I went and found a health food store to go buy my sunflower seeds and the different things to make my own custom trail mix. And wow, books. So I started browsing through books in the health food store, strictly out of curiosity.
Yeah.
And a book that really grabbed my attention was one by Paul Bragg called Scientific Fasting. So in
Okay.
thumbing through this book, like, what is fasting? What is all scientific about fasting? I used to hear about fasting with grandma, church and Easter and, Lent and all of this stuff. But so I was just curious about that to see, where grandma got this thing from. What was it all about?
Right.
So I bought that book because it really grabbed my curiosity. Said, hey, if this stuff is what people are talking about, and this thing about fasting, about cleaning out the system and flushing out, damn, I need to clean out if I'm going to be changing up anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was eating my hot dogs, my hamburgers and all these things, and started fasting. And, fasting once a week. But back then it was distilled water. But now today, is the day of coconut water. The Western culture discovered coconut water. So we moved from distilled water fasting to coconut water fasting today. So that first fast that I did, doing the once a week fast, 36 hours on distilled water, it floored me. I started like Friday night at 8 o'clock, intend on breaking it Sunday morning, 8 a.m. And Friday night Saturday night, after drinking a whole gallon of distilled water all day, I'm getting up in the middle of the night to go urinate.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I felt dizzy, nauseous, and I fell out. I fainted.
Oh, wow.
Woke up in the morning right there and like, damn, what happened? So, I didn't bargain for this. So I said, well, let me finish reading the book, because there was a part that said, this is what you got to do. This is how you got to prepare yourself. And this is what happens during the process and how to break it and so forth. Oh, man, I understood clearly what happened. I stirred up some toxins.
Mm-hmm.
We're drinking all that water all day. And, it's in the bloodstream. And getting up, it's like shaking up, this bottle, where the toxins are in the stream, they separated, and shaking it up, they come back into reality, basically, and short circuit the oxygen on my brain, and I fainted, just fell out. So this really prompted me to get really more curious about this whole thing and why that happened and so forth. So I ended up just buying books, every book I could find on vegetarianism. So it took me 2 years to what you may call a transition period, because this is when the knowledge was coming in. So I went through the phase of, raw dairy, raw milk, raw cheese, rennetless cheese and things like that, goat milks and those things. So that took me about 2 years as I scratched and clawed trying to find out more information. And fortunately, back then, during those times, the whole imitation vegetarian food industry wasn't developed. So it wasn't about trying to substitute for meat and trying to have TVP, texturized vegetable protein, and gluten and all of those things in those days for me. So then, the next step was really just taking hold of my kitchen. So I had moved out of my parents' house and got my own place, and finally got a chance to decide what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to cook, not just what mama had in the house. And so I just started eliminating, because this guy, Paul Braggs, he had a whole series of books. I think I bought his whole library.
Right.
And there was one about what to eat and what not to eat.
Yeah.
Do's and don'ts. So, the first thing, you eliminate all the processed meats, the bologna, the salami, the hot dog, all the stuff that's been ground up and slewed up together, the pork and then the bread meat and all this. So I went through all of that process within a 2-year period. So by 1970, I'm a full-blooded vegetarian,
Right.
not consuming any animal products whatsoever. And that went on for a good 6 years because, I'm dealing with my traditional stuff, the rice and the beans and the plantains and all of these things in the traditional West Indian, Caribbean cuisine, and also growing up in a Latin culture in Panama, the whole Latin cuisine as well. And also I grew up, I was born on the Canal Zone of Panama, which was a U.S. territory.
Right.
So I was exposed to some, basic American cuisine in my early years. But when I moved to New York at the age of 17 and went into high school, that's when I got introduced to the sad diet, full head on, the standard American diet.
Right. Right. Right.
Characters like Sloppy Joe, you know, hamburgers, because we never had hamburgers in my days, hot dogs, and because all the foods we ate was homemade,
Right.
and everything cooked from scratch in grandma's kitchen,
Yeah.
and all fresh. So, so getting into this processed diet, eating in the cafeteria in school, by 1972, when I graduated from when I left my junior college or community college, the consciousness got really much, much deeper because here was now the whole heavy influence of the hippie movement and also the Black Power movement. I read a book by an author at the time his name was Don L. Lee, but he's more better known as Haki Madhubuti. And the name of that book, and I see it's even today, you can still even find it on Amazon. The name of the book was From Plan to Planet.
Yeah.
That if, black people of African descent, in the 60s, based on the Black Power movement, if we're going to go anywhere, if we're going to liberate ourselves, then we need to take these principles in mind and get from the planning stage and take it to the planetary stage. And one whole chapter in that book was about diet as it
Right.
relates specifically to African people.
Absolutely.
And one of the big things that he pointed out was all white foods are mutants, whether it's white flour, white sugar, white salt, you name it, white rice, they're all mutants. Substance come in colors. So you want to eat foods with rich, deep colors.
Absolutely.
So of
Yeah.
course, so then I started moving into the whole wheat, away from the white flour, moving into the brown rice, and also through the hippie influence, demanding now organically grown, chemical free, and these types of things.
Right.
In
Yeah.
my neighborhood where I was living in Bedford Stuyvesant or Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, we had an independent African school, black school. And this school had a co-op attached to it. And the co-op was only about, as you would say today, plant-based foods. And in this co-op, working in this co-op, getting exposed to this in my neighborhood, and taking a class at the co-op, Vegetarian 101. So we're talking 1974. So the consciousness is getting stronger, deeper, clearer, and going to vegetarian restaurants in my neighborhood and seeing, the whole energy of the soulfulness
Yeah.
of African vegetarianism, black vegetarianism, the Southern soul food diet delivered vegetarian style,
Wow.
without the ham hocks and the chitlings and, all of these other types of stuff, great cornbread, sweet potato, collard greens, but all vegetarian style.
Which must have
You
been
know,
amazing. Yeah, that must have been incredible.
oh yes, and especially also being in Brooklyn, that melting pot of African culture. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
have the Caribbean influence. The
yeah, yeah,
Rastafarian. Ital restaurants. Stuff. Rundown.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Vegetables
yeah, yeah.
in coconut milk. You know, Ital patties made with ackee and lentils rather
Yes,
than chicken and fish and
yes,
ground beef and all of these things. And then of course, being in that great, megapolis of New York, then you have all these ethnic cuisines as well. So you have the Middle Eastern cuisine. So you get tabbouleh, you get falafel. So hey, you know, and then here's the hippie restaurants out there. So by 1975, I moved to California,
yeah.
went to school, graduate school in Orange County near Los Angeles. So hey, I mean, this is like big time now,
Yeah, yeah. I can
in
imagine.
terms
Yeah,
of my consciousness, organic farms, vegetarian restaurants,
amazing.
you know, even like places like the Hare Krishna with the Govinda restaurants, all vegetarian, meatless marathon. I remember there was a restaurant on Venice Beach in LA called Meatless Marathon where you can get like unlimited vegetarian protein dishes, you know. And so here came a whole nother wave of consciousness. So by 1976, it was all about raw food now. It
Right.
was all about living food,
Yeah,
you know.
which is leading on to my next question, and that was when did you decide to go into the living foods, and
So again,
what
that
made you go
was
into that?
well, that was 6 years later after becoming a full-fledged vegetarian. But it wasn't that I was of this mindset that I'm transitioning to raw food for 6 years. Not at all. It's
Right.
just how the consciousness came to me, and all of the reading. So I consumed pretty much every book I could find on raw food. People like Hilton Hotema, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
uh, the Richters. They had a restaurant. They had restaurants in L.A., vegetarian restaurants in L.A. in the 50s. Raw food vegetarian restaurants. So this whole thing about raw food today, even in my days, it was nothing new.
Right.
It was just updating, of what was going on.
Yeah.
That because the seeds had been planted for years. By then, I mean, it was at least 100 years. There's reference to raw foodism
Yeah.
that goes back as far as 1850.
Oh wow.
So I amassed a tremendous library of over 12,000 volumes of books. So every book on vegetarianism, on raw food, everything I could find, I just bought it and consumed as much of it as I could consume. And getting into the whole thing of developing cuisine for myself, for my family, for my children, and just all eclectic, all creative. Never went to any cooking school, any vegetarian schools or anything like that. I would buy cookbooks galore, whether it's raw food, the basic raw food cookbooks from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, George and Doris Fathman, the Uncooked Book,
Yeah.
these types of books, been around, been around. What we're hearing today with this whole raw food movement has actually become nothing but a raw food circus. You know?
Yeah.
It's like the new Columbus. They discover raw food now.
Right.
Come on,
Yeah.
come on. Raw food has been around from time immemorial. Human beings have been on this planet for at least 1 million years based on recorded history. And it's
Right.
only been probably no more than 300,000 years since the advent of fire.
Wow.
So we've been experimenting with eating cooked food for about 300,000 years. Prior to that, for 700,000 years, human beings never ate any cooked food. We had no fire to cook anything with. So don't bring any argument, any scientific or religious argument to me about, whether we are raw foodists or not, whether we're vegetarian or not.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. Like when you put it like that, it just kind of puts everything into perspective. So, no, no, you're right. And what's the like? What can you tell, the listeners about the benefits? Like, what are the great benefits of eating, living foods?
Well, number one, for me, as I am a living example of someone who has been eating all living foods now
And how long have you been
for
living? I mean,
42 years,
wow, that's a long time, my brother.
and been eating all vegetarian foods for 48 years.
Wow.
And I'm now 70 years of age. When I became 70 in July to renew my driver's license, I had to get a medical clean bill of health, because, 70 years old,
Yeah.
these governments are not going to trust you on the highway with their driver's license.
Yeah, yeah.
You're supposed to be senile or something, at least a nervous wreck, going wrecking everybody on the road.
Yeah, yeah.
Alzheimer's or whatever, glaucoma or something going on. So I had to go get a comprehensive medical examination, physical and mental. And yeah, I posted it up on Facebook. I think it was sometime around the first week of August
Mm-hmm.
when I got the results, where my doctor wrote back for me to give to the motor vehicle people to get my license renewed, that this man, 70 years of age, is in perfect health.
That's amazing.
Blood analysis, urine analysis, all the stuff, all of my protein count, my B12, everything listed on there. This, that, XYZ. It's posted on Facebook for those of you who want to go take a look. Again, around the first or second week of August 2017, I posted it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in perfect health, mental and physical. No disease, wear no glasses, no pot belly, no medications, don't take vitamin supplements, don't have any issue with B12. Yes, I do have a B12 deficiency, like probably every person in the world.
That's a great example, especially when it comes to the whole B12 thing, because especially and in this day and age, there's a lot of talk right now about where to get your B12 and blah 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 blah. So, like, what would you say about that whole B12 thing?
Well, again, based on their examinations, their analysis, I am deficient in B12.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked the Harvard Medical School, I posed the question to them, Harvard, why is it that I have a B12 deficiency, yet I don't exhibit any of the symptoms associated, any of the disease conditions associated with someone who have a B12 deficiency?
Right.
Why is it that I'm not a mental basket case? Because someone at my age with a B12 deficiency, they got issues mentally, instability, insecurity, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it that I'm not a nervous wreck? Why is it that my nerves are steady? My nerves are strong and I have a B12 deficiency. And you say my nerves are supposed to be shot because I have a B12 deficiency. Explain this to me, Harvard.
Absolutely, yeah.
So my understanding, first of all, based on observation, we know that the way they decide how much B12 you need is by measuring the excrement, the waste that come out of human beings. And because human beings, most of these people, the waste that they measured on are people who are carnivores. They're meat eaters.
Right.
And they eat a lot of animal flesh that is loaded with B12. So in their excrement show 95% of the B12 that they consume from eating animal food, animal carcass, 95% of the B12 is excreted in their waste.
Right.
So the trichology industry or the vitamin cartel say you need to replenish 95%, this much value of B12. You should be taking this much B12.
Okay. I didn't
So
know that.
obviously, when you read that, when you look at that observation, you understand logically that, hey, you're only synthesizing 5%. You're only utilizing 5% of all of that B12 that you are eating, you're consuming in animal protein. So, gee,
Wow.
I hate to think of what would happen if that animal protein did not have B12, whether it would have came through your system. It probably would have choked you to death. So all that B12 was probably necessary for that animal flesh to transit through your body. If 95% of it is coming out in your waste, and
Yeah.
if you look at the animal that produced the greatest amount of B12, the cow, the
Mm-hmm.
cow, they're out on the pasture all day long, at least daylight day long. And they're eating nothing but grass. They're not eating any B12. They are synthesizing and producing B12 in their intestinal tract. They're not only grazing in the grass, but they're also in the sunshine from sunrise to sunset. Full life of sunshine and eating grass and
Mm-hmm.
synthesizing. It's a photosynthesis process that they use to produce this B12. So, humans, why are you hiding from the sun? Why are you living in the ice box? Why are you in the UK? Why are you in Europe? Why are you all the way up there, damn up in Alaska, away
Absolutely.
from the sun?
Wow.
The sun is food. And this is why we're going to get to the point of why I named my cuisine Sunfired Foods.
Yes, please. And you know what? That's great because that kind of leads to my next question. So yeah, please let the listeners know more about, your Sunfired Institute and why you decided um, to name it Sunfired Foods.
Well, first let's zip up the B12 issue
Yeah.
because for 48 years
Sorry, I
of
thought that was
eating,
zipped up, but yeah.
yeah, for 48 years of consuming nothing but plant-based food that has very little, if any, B12 in it, and having a B12 deficiency and not taking any B12 supplements and not buying into the raw food circus of them selling you B12 patches.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these folks in this raw food circus, they're nothing but merchants and raw food sales. So they use it to sell you a whole bunch of everything you don't need other than what you really need, which is fresh food.
Yes.
So if you're eating fresh food, grass, greens, green leafy vegetable, unfortunately the raw food circus can't sell you fresh grass, fresh greens,
Mm-hmm.
because it's perishable. They can't put it in the mail and send it to you like they sell the powdered superfoods, super green mix, powdered. You need fresh grass. You need to be able to harvest that fresh grass, just like the cow with the morning dew on it, and eat it in the sunshine to produce B12 yourself. And you can only produce B12 or adequate amount of B12 in your small intestine, in your intestinal tract, if you have no unfriendly bacteria in there.
Yeah.
So cooked food vegetarians that eat all this great big cook up, starches and protein, all that big cook gook that produce a whole bunch of unfriendly bacteria in their system, they cannot synthesize and produce B12. So they're always the quick, warm target for the B12 industry,
Right, right, right.
the B12 peddling doctor. You are vegan. Woo! Plant based, vegetarian. You got a B12 deficiency. Oh, you need to buy this and you need to buy that. You should be eating meat anyway. Because plant food don't have any B12. That's why you're like this. And that's why you're sick. But they can't pull that on me. Again, they signed me off perfect health. And this is the word the doctor used on my medical report. This man is in perfect health and have no contagious disease at all.
That's incredible. That's absolutely
So
amazing.
my body is able to synthesize and produce the equivalent of the 5% B12 that is derived from eating animal flesh that your body utilizes. Because my gut does not have any unfriendly bacteria because I've been consuming all living, fresh plant food. So it's the environment, it's the constitution of your system that dictates your state of disease.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a B12 deficient individual, but I don't show the symptoms because I produce just enough B12 to stay healthy and to be in perfect health.
That's just
So you
that's
got to really wake up. Wake up.
absolutely. That's just that's great info because again, so much young people out there are so you know wary about how they're getting their B12 because there's so much different information about B12, and I think you've basically hit the nail on the head to say about the whole B12 theory and the whole B12 myth, and it makes so much sense to someone like myself anyway. So hopefully, all that is listening, it makes sense to them as well.
Yeah, so Sunfired.
Yes,
Sunfired is a
Sunfired.
word that I coined in it was 1979.
Mm-hmm.
When I started in Harlem, New York. I had just returned from living in Tanzania, at the foot of the Kilimanjaro mountain,
Yes.
up in Arusha with the Maasai. And the Maasai, they are serious carnivores. And beyond carnivores, they drink cow's blood because they're warriors. They want to get that warrior spirit in them.
Wow.
So to live amongst these people and not drink the cow blood, not to eat the goats and the other stuff, the meats and these things, but being all vegetarian and eating all raw food. This we're talking 1978 was the year that I lived up there with them and eating all raw food. Basically, I was a fruitarian. This is when I migrated from California in 1978. Pretty much my first 2 years of eating all living foods was pretty much that of a fruitarian. So this whole fruitarian thing today, again, there's nothing new under the sun,
Right.
you know. And then some people would even look at me today and say, "Oh, you just was ahead of your time. You're ahead of your time." I said, "No, I'm not ahead of my time. I'm on time. I've been on time, still on time. You are late.
That's brilliant.
You are late."
Yeah.
Okay? So you fruitarians today, you are late. Fruitarianism has been around
Yeah.
time immemorial. The natural, original, and best diet for human consumption is that of fruits. And,
Right.
if you pull out your scripture and you read carefully in Genesis where it says, "Behold, I've given unto you the seed yielding foods, and unto you they shall be your meat." MEAT. The seed yielding foods, which means that is basically the law of food that you need to deal with. Of all the laws you find in that book, that's really the most critical, most relevant one, and that's the one you overlook.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it's great because there's so much controversy when it comes to fruits, and you can't eat that much fruit because of sugar, blah 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 blah, which I don't believe anyway because most of my diet is fruit. So hearing it from someone like yourself is it's great. It's great to know.
Yeah, well, you have an issue with fruits if fruits are simple carbohydrates.
Hmm.
You know what carbohydrates are? It's sugar. Fruits are simple sugar,
Yes.
simple carbohydrates. On the other side, you have what is known as complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are starches. They're food that needs to be converted into sugar for the body to be able to utilize them.
Yeah.
So the fruits that are simple sugar, they are high in moisture. The fruits that are complex carbohydrate that needs to be converted into sugar, they are dense, no
Hmm.
moisture. We're talking root, the deep roots, yams and potatoes,
Hmm.
cassava, yuca, tropical yams, the yellow yam from Jamaica, the Trelawney yam, the white yam from Africa, and the one they even call the Negro yam because it makes your knee grow. These are all
Amazing.
starches. These are all complex carbohydrates. And anything that's complex is complicated.
Hmm. Exactly.
And besides those deep roots, your grains, the larger the grain, the more starch is in it. This is a complex carbohydrate. These foods have to be turned into sugar. Rice, wheat, oats, barley, millet, rye, quinoa,
Hmm.
grains. Human beings are not grain eaters by nature. We're not granivores. We're not rice eaters by nature. It's only been 10,000 years since we first started eating grains. Grains are not food, they're seeds for cereal grass.
Hmm.
Wheat is a seed for a grass that is known as wheatgrass. And we're going to look at that a little later too. Well, I
Amazing.
hope your audience got time and patience because I got a whole lot.
No, so do I. I really do. I think I hope they do because I definitely do. This is knowledge that's not not easy to get. So they should have the patience to really listen and understand. The knowledge that's coming from you. So it's great to hear. It's great to hear.
Yeah. So
Um,
grains, we're not rice eaters by nature. This whole
mhm,
thing about eating rice, it's only been 10,000 years you've been experimenting with eating rice.
exactly.
Rice is nothing but a straw. It's a seed for a straw or a bamboo type of plant. And it has no moisture. So you got to boil it to death to pump it up with water. And this is the problem with all of your complex carbohydrates, all of your starches. They have very little moisture. Of course, when you look at the root vegetables, those that grow closer to the surface of the earth have a higher content of moisture. So the higher the moisture, the less starch. So your carrots, your beets, the turnips, the parsnips, the onion and the garlic, very little starch. Even the onion and the garlic have no starch. They're not even classified as root vegetables. They're not classified under starches, under complex carbohydrates. They're classified based on the green leaves that project above the earth
Hmm.
from them. So they're vegetables. And your carrot, your beets, your parsnips, your turnips, these high moisture root vegetables, and things like the jicama, an exotic tropical vegetable that is produced mostly in Mexico. You juice a jicama, it's pure water and it's sweet, tastes like sugar. You juice a carrot, it's sweet, tastes like sugar. You juice a beet, it is sweet, tastes like sugar. They even make sugar out of beets. So there's a whole process, there's a whole scientific process. And that's why for me, this is why we call the cuisine Sunfired Foods.
Right.
Because it's not just about the art, making great, exciting, palatable, taste arresting, taste bud arresting food, but it has to meet a certain nutritional, scientific qualification as well to be Sunfired Foods. And so the science of Sunfired Foods, when we're looking at what we're talking about, the difference between a simple and a complex carbohydrate, a sugar and a starch, and starch has to be converted into sugar. Your potatoes, your rice, your sweet potatoes, your yams have to be converted into sugar for the body to be able to utilize it. It has to become a fruit-like sugar,
Yeah,
a
because
grape-like sugar.
it needs that.
Grape,
Yeah, because it needs that energy to run, doesn't it?
well, that's what it's all about. We run on sugar.
Yeah.
The human body runs on sugar. Actually, every food we consume is broken down into a simple sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Even your protein. Your protein is broken down into amino acids. Amino acids are sugars. So everything has to be broken down. We run on sugar. So don't tell me as a fruitarian I'm eating too much sugar.
Yeah.
My fuel is too premium.
Absolutely.
Please,
Absolutely.
we need to examine that, and we need to understand what is it we're talking about. We got to look at it, the science of these things. And besides the roots and the grains, also your beans, or the group that is called legumes, the leguminous vegetables.
Yes.
All of your beans are starch as well. There's a couple of exceptions, but most of your beans are 70% starch, complex carbohydrates, and 30% protein. And even that hook right there is a challenge because the body cannot digest effectively starch and protein in the same mouthful.
Right.
So that's why anytime you eat beans, you get gassed up because there's some fermentation that's going to take place
Yeah. Yeah.
between the carbohydrate and the protein that is found in the bean. So there's a certain scientific process that it needs to undergo in order to break that bond.
Mm-hmm.
And cooking really makes the bond more challenging for the human body to process because cooking destroys the digestive enzymes that breaks down the starches and the one that breaks down the protein or the fat. So your four groups of food, one is fat based. These are the ones that we refer to as protein.
Yeah.
One is sugar based. These are the ones we refer to as simple carbohydrates, or better known as fruits. The third group is starch based. These are your complex carbohydrates, your root vegetables, your grains, and your beans. Of course, within those three subgrouping, some have more starch than others.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with the fruit world. Some have more sugar than others.
Yeah. Exactly.
There are quite a few fruits that contain zero sugar. Zero sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking based on the botanical classification of fruits. When you study botany, botany says that all foods that comes to you with seed or seeds are fruits.
Yes. Exactly.
And this is where the reference in your scripture is talking about. Behold, for I've given unto you the seed yielding foods. That means your food should come with seeds in it. Behold, it shall be your meat. And again, that's the original meaning of food, is meat. It shall be your food.
Absolutely. And going back into what you were saying earlier on, about certain root vegetables, which was the carrots, was it? The carrots and the beetroots and stuff.
Ones with a high moisture,
Yeah.
yes.
How do you feel about those vegetables, because there's a lot of information out there that young people especially are starting to discover about certain vegetables and fruits that maybe don't have seeds, that are hybrid fruits and
Yes.
vegetables. So, you know, someone coming from someone like yourself, like what would you, suggest, or what would be your take on those type of fruits and vegetables?
Well, first of all, I want to give thanks to the great work that was done by one of our wonderful ancestors, our contemporary, my great brother, Dr. Sabi.
Yes.
Dr. Sabi really brings it home about the hybrid foods,
Mm-hmm.
those foods that are seedless. But he particularly targeted in on the carrot.
Yes.
But there's no difference between a carrot, a potato, a sweet potato, a yam, a beet, a turnip, a parsnip, an onion, any root vegetable, or any vegetable that do not contain seed. So he highlighted the carrot. So many of us use the carrot as our pet peeve.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it's about starch. It's about complex carbohydrates. It's about certain vegetables that all been manipulated by human ingenuity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the whole thing about grafting and crossbreeding and, you know, just hybridizing
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to heirloom or original natural occurring seeds or foods. Heirloom. So the carrot is a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
The beet is a hybrid. But if you really get deep and closer down into analyzing all the foods that are available to us today, damn near 95% of all of them are hybrid.
Yeah, which is true.
Celery is hybrid, lettuce is hybrid, spinach is hybrid, beans are hybrid, all of them are hybrid, all your grains are hybrid.
Wow.
Please. Even many of the fruits are hybrid. There are very few select. You see, they sell you what they call heirloom tomatoes. They put the big price tag on it because it's heirloom. What else are they putting heirloom on? There's nothing else in your grocery store or your health food store that's got the heirloom name on it. Because if it's heirloom, they're gonna charge you big money, like they charge you for those heirloom tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much 95, 99% of all the food we consume today are hybrid. So if you're gonna beat up on the carrot and eat corn tortillas, please check yourself. Check
Absolutely.
yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Potato is one of the most hybridized food. You see the Incas, the Indians up in Peru, they got thousands of varieties of potatoes. Apples are one of the most hybridized food. There's over 5,000 variety of apples. And unfortunately, the ones that you'll get today, the commercial ones, are the most hybridized ones on the market. So you're chomping down on all those apples and throwing the carrot away because it's hybrid. And all those apples you're eating are all hybrid. The red delicious, the golden delicious, the gala, the Fuji.
Wow.
They have been manipulated to withstand. After the fall, all apples are picked before the fall ends, before they freeze on the tree, because they grow in cool, temperate environments. So in New York State, the Big Apple, known for its big apple production, every single apple is picked off that tree by November, off those apple trees. And they all put in cold storage. So an apple that you're eating in July, in February, they were picked in the fall because they would have been frozen. So they're picked at a certain stage of immaturity and they're locked in a cold storage. And that cold storage door is labeled Open this one up July 21st. Open this one up July 22nd. Open this one up July 23rd. Check
Wow.
yourself. If you
Wow.
want to get infinite and you want to get into the nitty gritty, as we used to say back then, you got to check every single thing. And all these
Absolutely.
seedless watermelons. Many of you in the icebox don't get seedless watermelons anymore. I mean, get watermelons with seeds anymore. And especially you ladies, you need to be careful. You eat seedless foods, you're going to be barren.
So
And
it's
even our men as well, you're going to be impotent.
so in saying all that, would you still say it's good to consume those foods? Um,
No, I'm not saying it is,
okay.
but what choice do you have?
What choice do you have exactly? Yeah.
What choice do you have? Are you in your tropical paradise?
Hmm.
Or do you have your own farm? Are you growing your stuff? Are you getting heirloom seeds? Heirloom. Go online. Heirloom seed companies. Are you growing your own? Or do you know exactly what are you really eating? But most of you are hostages living in big urban environments. You're hostage to what can last in the supermarket for the next week.
Hmm.
So it's mega agribusiness foods that you're consuming, even in your most profound, expensive natural food supermarket. The hybrid, now the GMO and all of those things, you're buying those things up as natural foods,
But it's better than
irradiate seeds and all kinds of stuff going on.
yeah. But it's better to eat that than to eat nothing at all, obviously. And it's better to eat that than to be eating, as you said, tortilla chips or whatnot.
Well, the thing is, then this is why we gotta, well, look, the Sunfired Culinary Institute, we're based in Costa Rica,
Hmm.
land of food paradise. Costa Rica has 5 volcanoes. So practically every soil in Costa Rica is rich.
Wow.
So I'm living in an area where we have the institute in an area that is called Diamond Valley. Of course, lots of diamonds were cleared out of here.
Hmm.
But it is one of the most progressive agricultural, natural, organic, biodynamic agricultural growing regions area of the entire world. And it even boasts one of what they call a blue zone. There are 5 blue zones in the world. Look up blue zone. Blue zones are places where the entire population in a blue zone, on a whole, live to be more than 100 years of age. But besides that, not to be confused with the centenarian valleys in Ecuador, Vilcabamba, and Shangri-La Valley in the Himalayas. A blue zone is a place where you live in peace, harmony with the universe. You not only live to be a centenarian, but you live a very healthy, productive life in a blue zone. So, you know, a lot of these stuff are available online, so I don't have to go deep into this
Yeah.
type of information.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, living here, having my farm makes a big difference. So I know what I'm consuming. I know what I'm eating. When I have organic markets to choose from, farmers market, 7 days a week, you can find healthy, strong, vibrant, organic market somewhere in Costa Rica, and especially in my neighborhood, Abundance. Permaculture farm. This is permaculture farming mecca of the world. Intentional communities. fruitarian communities. The Costa Rica Fruit Fest is coming up. Look it up. I'm going to be doing major presentations there.
Sounds
We have the
amazing.
big Envision Festival coming up in a couple of weeks. 7,000 people come to camp and party on a beach, eating natural foods, organic, yoga, and all the other stuff. Look it up. But this is not to discredit other neighborhoods, other environments, and not to speak, in any low way about the efforts that is being made in all these other places, because there's tremendous progress that are being made, leaps and bounds. As you said, there's a serious consciousness going on college campuses today around vegetarianism,
Yeah.
around plant-based cuisine, around veganism, and especially around raw food and fruitarianism. Big time, serious going on. But not only on the college campuses, but around the entire world. The demand, the consciousness for this life is unbounded, and it is not a fad. I've been watching it for the past 50 years. And what you're seeing, definitely what you're experiencing, what you're living, is the fruits of the labor, of the seeds that have been planted over the past 50 years. And you are taking it to another level. So it gives me tremendous joy and pleasure to see, what's going on. When I became all raw, all Sunfired Foods 42 years ago, I did not meet more than 10 people that I could touch physically at that time that were consuming 100% plant-based, vegetarian, raw food.
Yeah.
And now today, throughout the world, every community I go to, everywhere, it is not sparing any village. There is raw food eaters. There are raw foodists. There's a huge wave. There's a huge consciousness. There's a huge, what we call ascension to higher heights. People are sick and tired of being sick. So if it's not about trying to defend their health, protect their life, their well-being, their wellness of their family, protect the animals, protect the environment, it's all merging together. And it's like totally from the grassroots up, we are pushing the limits. We have put a whipping on the meat cartel, the cattle industry, that they ran for cover and got into the soybean industry and corrupted that one too. So they even trying to run out of that now too. Vegetarianism have pushed it. You see what happened in the U.S. You see what Michelle Obama did for the U.S. DA in terms of the food choices. She moved them from the pyramid and took them to the My Plate concept. And the My Plate concept, this was radical. This was very revolutionary for this woman to do this. Mm-hmm. But she was responding from the pressure of the raw food, of the conscious movement, of the vegetarian movement, of the fruitarian, because this is stuff that we were saying for over 40 years. And we've been hitting them in the pocket economically. And she stepped up, she saw it, put an organic garden in the White House. Can you imagine?
Wow, exactly.
Many schools in the U.S. today now got organic gardens in the school. Even the high school I went to in Brooklyn, New York, in the hood, got an organic garden today in the high school where we used to have the track and field. They turned the track and field thing into an organic garden and put the track and field somewhere else.
That's amazing. That's a step forward. That's what we like to hear as well. That's great.
There are even schools in the U.S., junior high school in the U.S., that serve only vegetarian foods. Vegetarian foods. I remember I think that the chancellor of the Board of Education of New York a few years ago, who was a vegetarian himself, instituted. And so there are many schools now, even in the U.S., that are strictly all plant-based, all vegetarian. So the movement is
It's growing. It's there.
uproot,
It's happening.
and there's no reversing it. There's no
Exactly.
reversing it. The demand for my service is crazy.
I can imagine. I can only imagine. And but the fact that you gave your service today and that you're on this show is again, thank you so much, man. This is a gem for me. This is amazing. So I do appreciate your time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
So Sunfired, the
Sunfired,
word
yes.
Sunfired. You know, back in the days, we used to hear about raw food, and I'm like, wait a minute, raw food? That ain't gonna cut. There's nothing raw about this food. This food is cooked. You know, a banana is cooked. A tomato is cooked. Lettuce is cooked. Cucumber is cooked. It's been cooked by the sun.
Exactly.
The growing period is the cooking process. From the time the banana tree blossoms, from the time the cherry tree blossoms, till the time you have full, ripe, juicy cherries. That's been the entire cooking process. It takes a year to cook my bananas, a whole year to cook my plantain, a whole year. I mean, some things only 6 months, but it depends. Some things are ready in 3 months, you know, but it's cooked. I eat cooked food. So there's nothing raw. I mean, to me, that's another curse word, to call my food raw, to insult your creator and say the food is raw. The plantain is raw. I'm going to fix it. You did not do a good job. I'm going to steam it, bake it, boil it, jerk it, fry it. Please, respect.
Amazing.
Respect.
Amazing.
The point is, the sun is the chef. I am not a chef. I'm an artist, maybe a food scientist. But the sun cooks for every single human being on this planet. It's only one chef. That is the sun.
Beautiful.
So the growing period is the cooking process. Without the sun, there's no food. There's no life. Also, back in the days before, besides raw food, they used to say living foods, which some people even still today, they talk about living foods. Yeah, there's some foods that are living. Sprouts are living. But the minute you break a lettuce, it is now dead. You know, but living foods would also, the reason I did not ascribe to that terminology either, because I see them bouncing some live lobsters and live crabs at your table and call it living foods. Even, you know, some place where they sell clams, they call it raw bar. You remember that? A raw bar. I mean, I used to be like, oh, I'm looking for raw food. I look up in the telephone directory. I'm going someplace like raw food. Shit, I end up at a clam bar. A clam bar, living foods. You know, live shrimps, live crab, live fish, and all this stuff being tortured at your table for your pleasure. So, I mean, no, so I can't deal with living food, not my food.
Okay.
Then there's another terminology, unfired foods. This is what George and Doris Fathman called their cuisine. This is what people in the 40s, 50s used to call raw food, unfired foods. And I'm like, no, that one ain't gonna cut it either, because there's nothing on about this food. I need to. This is positive. We need to put it in a positive light.
Positive light. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So being an innovator, as I am, being a creative person, growing up in my grandma's kitchen, growing up in a culture in a way where you have to make do, where you have to create, where you got to invent not only food but a whole way of existing in an unequal world. You got to invent a life. You got to invent reality. I said, I got to come up with a better word, a better terminology, and hence Sunfired Foods. But all I did was I took unfired foods and put a positive spin on it. I added the S to Unfired Foods.
Love it. It's great.
And got Sunfired Foods. And the point about Sunfired Foods is that the food is cooked by the sun in the growing period, is the cooking process. Some people may think that, oh, he puts the pie crust together and put it out in the sun and let the sun cook it. That's what most people concept of Sunfired Foods. No, I don't put the food out in the sun to cook. The food been out in the sun for a year, 3 months, 6 months, cooking. The almonds been cooking. The lettuce been cooking. The cabbage been cooking. All that stuff been cooking. So what I do is I don't cook the sun out of the food.
Mm-hmm.
So Sunfired Foods are food that we process and turn into art, edible art.
Beautiful.
So that it could be associated with modern day cuisine. So we come up with, yes, things that you can associate with a hamburger, things you can associate with a pizza, things you can associate with a meatball. But we're not imitating, we're not faking, we are not mocking. So when I come up with a corned beef, you may hear corned beef. It's just the association. When I come up even with the word sun-fired, many of you hear sun-fried, the association.
Yeah.
So the food is cooked by the sun, sun-fired food. We don't cook the sun out of the food.
Yeah.
So what we are doing with our art and science is to do a modern technological scientific transference of solar energy to your body through the food. So when you're consuming food today, when you're processing food, when you're coming up with these great gourmet raw food cuisine, as I've been acclaimed for in the Oxford Encyclopedia, and they just not only use the word gourmet, but they also use the word ethical. So that's where the vegans feel comfortable with me.
Yeah.
Ethical, gourmet, ethical, raw food cuisine. Before I got into the whole business, raw food was strictly, in my time, a food, a diet that only sick people ate, because it was designed as a very pure, clean, healing cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
So people with terminal diseases, cancer, and very intense stuff would go to raw food centers. The Natural Hygiene Society. There was a whole, before what we know today as modern raw food, there was the natural hygiene movement. In the early century, the early 20th century, right through to the 60s, Dr. Herbert Shelton, Hilton Hotema, many proponents of the natural hygiene. And the natural hygiene system was about no salt, no chemicals, no cooking. I went to a natural hygiene convention at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach back in my early days. I'm like, oh, raw foodists. I'm going to go to these raw food conventions. So I go to a natural hygiene convention and I go sit around the dinner table with these folks to eat. You had a stick of carrot, a stick of celery, a leaf of lettuce, a whole tomato. This was their version of raw food. Pure, simple, but it was about healing. Because their thing was that all disease is toxemia. Toxemia is waste, garbage, filth in the body. So that's where today we have derived this detox movement, taking out the toxemia out of the body. So a lot of this stuff, I said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Exactly.
It's just been repackaged, remarketed, rehashed with a modern tag, with modern hashtags, with buzzwords. But it's the same old time teachings.
Absolutely.
Same old time teaching. Then you had Dr. Ann Wigmore, the Hippocrates Health Institute, the wheatgrass lady, healing cancer and all these devastating disease with raw food, or what she termed living foods, because it was all about sprouts. The same Oxford Encyclopedia, the 2004 edition, and the revised edition in 2012, they did an expose. This is look it up, the Oxford Encyclopedia of Food and Drink, 2004 and 2012 edition, did an expose on the history of vegetarianism. And they went back. Unfortunately, they didn't go far enough back
Too
to
far, yeah.
Imhotep and the sages of ancient Kemet,
Yeah.
or what you know today as Egypt, where they had the mystery schools. And to get into the mystery school, you had to fast 40 days and 40 nights. You had to eat all raw foods and all of this stuff to get into this. This is where Pythagoras and these folks, the Greeks, studied their nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So this so-called Hippocrates, the father of medicine, studied at the banks of the Nile, or studied from another Greek who went to the banks of the Nile and studied with the ancient ones to get this information.
Right, right.
There's Imhotep, who came before Hippocrates. Imhotep is the first doctor to discover that in the human body there's a such thing as a circulation of the blood. Imhotep was not only a doctor, he was a vizier. A vizier is an advisor to the emperor. So you're talking about multitasking. A vizier is not only a doctor, an engineer. They got about 12 different titles, and not the type of titles you get from your PhD institutions today. The titles that gave them the will, the power, the strength, the wisdom to build ancient civilization, pyramids and all these things, even computers and airplanes back then,
Yeah.
that you are finally decoding and just drawing all these secrets that are sitting in the vaults of the Vatican, all the libraries from ancient places that was raided and brought to Alexandria, all the ancient wisdoms. And this is where a lot of what we're talking today about, when we talk about Sunfired Foods, the roots go far, far, far back. So in that expose on the history of vegetarianism, they started off with the Greeks, and they went through all the different ages, got into, the whole conflict era with, what's his name, the got into the Quakers with the Quaker Oats and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
They got into the Harvey Kellogg, got into Ben Franklin, and went through the whole history of vegetarianism. Not just, I mean, but in the whole world, the U.S., Europe. Of course, they didn't touch on indigenous communities, the history of the Incas and the Olmecs and the Mayas, and how they developed, vegetarianism culture as well, which is what many people are going down to Peru today and raiding, their ancient wisdom piles of knowledge, of information, of agricultural, innovation, and bringing it up back north the same way the pirates used to come down to these places and steal the gold and the riches and take it up north and sell it for big money. The raw food pirates in the raw food circus going down and getting what they call the superfoods and bringing it up north and selling it for big money. It's amazing to see how history repeats itself in a different way.
It's amazing. And again, I think like everything that you're sharing with us is just so So amazing, because obviously the base of it is what we consume, what we eat, but at the same time you're sharing the history of where it all began and where it all begins, so it's great.
Yeah, I mean, food is the main ingredient. It makes us or breaks us.
Exactly, there we
You
go.
know? So in that
Absolutely.
same Oxford Encyclopedia, when they got up to the modern age, they talk about Dr. Ann Wigmore.
Right.
What an angel, this woman. They said so in the modern age, they speak about the raw food movement.
Mm-hmm.
And they said the only contribution the raw food movement have made to humanity came through Dr. Ann Wigmore, the sprout lady, for introducing the world, introducing humanity to sprouts, especially wheatgrass.
Right.
And then in the next breath, they said, and another immigrant to the US, because Ann Wigmore was from Lithuania.
Right.
They said, and another immigrant to the US, Aris Latham, is considered the father of ethical gourmet raw food cuisine for having developed Sunfired Foods, which he started in Harlem, New York, in the ghetto in 1979. This is when Sunfired Foods got birthed. This is when we coined the word Sunfired, and it's definitely legendary. So to be in an encyclopedia and to be able to sit here today at the age of 70 and all the reference, everybody else that was mentioned in that encyclopedia are all deceased.
Mm-hmm.
So to be acknowledged and recognized as a living legend for the work that I have done, it's quite an amazing honor. So it's a pleasure to be able to be on your show, to share with your audience, to share with the new young generation, because the works that we have, the works that we continue building on in the 60s, the revolutionary work, it's going to take generations for us to set this thing straight and
Absolutely.
get us back to our roots,
Totally
bring us
agree.
all back home. So, generation present, it's great to have you in the house. It's great to be able to share with you and help you avoid some of those crucial pitfalls that many of us fall into trying to be a faking vegetarian.
Yes, exactly. Nice. It's wonderful, and even the whole sun-fired thing. It is sun-fired, right? It's not sun-cooked.
No, Sunfired,
Yeah.
Fired.
Okay, great. Because that's inspired me to use sun-cooked, because just the way that
Yes,
the way that you've done the sun-fired, it's inspired me to use that line,
fantastic.
sun-cooked. You know what I mean? So I've kind of taken that
Fantastic.
from you and just kind of made it my own as well. Because again, it just when I first heard you say that, it just makes complete sense to me. And the way that you've broken it down in this podcast should obviously make sense to everybody else. So thank you for inspiring me, and I'm sure that you'll inspire a lot of
Oh,
other
you
young
are
people.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, just
There's so much depth to all of this. So I would love to sit with you again because I would love to get in with the science. I love to get him a couple of recipes or,
yes,
and
that'd be amazing.
things like that.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for just giving up your time and being my guest on the show. I really do appreciate it, brother, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, man. You're welcome, man. I look forward, my brother. No
Yeah,
problem.
absolutely, man. So I really do wish you the best, and I hope to see you soon, bro.
All right. Thanks, man. You take care, man.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace. So I hope you enjoyed that podcast from the legendary Aris Latham. I absolutely love speaking with him and listening to his wisdom. I hope you took away some valuable knowledge that will inspire you all on your individual journeys. Now you can find, add and keep up to date with Aris via his Facebook, which is Aris Latham, ArisLatham. Check out his website, which is arissoul.com or sunfired.com. Follow his Instagram, which is arislife_, ARISlife_. And you can also follow my journey if you're not already on Instagram, which is at Living Plant Foods, LIVINGPLANTFOOODS. Thank you so much again. Let's all push this forward. Love, light, and blessings to each and every one of you. Peace.